of you just joining us, I have the one and only Dael Kingsmill here with me to answer all of my questions about Dungeons and Dragons, with a special flavor of some of the things that I love her deep dives into from Monarch's Factory and her other work. And we've been talking all about building your own mythology for the game, but I want to make sure we get to a lot of your questions, so keep sending those. And we also wanted to talk a little bit, Dale, about the three pillars of Dungeons and Dragons, and specifically the two that aren't combat. Because you have said this is something that's been on your mind a lot. Is it thinking about how best to serve those other pillars, or are you going to go wild and be like, no, throw them out?
Get rid of them. Only combat all the time. Um, no, what it is okay, this was some bait. It's not really bait. You said, "What do you want to talk about?" And I said, "This." But this is some bait I laid out because I want to talk about Strixhaven for a minute because I'm so
Yay!
excited about Strixhaven. Okay, I'm so excited about it. I'm someone who tends to like run my own stuff, right? Like that's the kind of person that we've been talking about world building a lot, right? Like I tend to homebrew my own setting. Strixhaven, I read it and I immediately wanted to play in it. And I think that part of that is because it gives you such a great foundation, like a jungle gym to play on for the role play pillar specifically of the game, which is something that a lot of people struggle with because it's not that it's not possible or that there aren't rules that serve that, but this really gave you just so much meat to work with as a DM or as a player. The fact that okay, can I just say it's my favorite genre in the world is there's an adventure but also you have school tomorrow. That's my favorite thing is, Buffy,
From
I have
Spider-Man
to
to
save the
Buffy
world.
to Wizard Schools. Yeah.
Pretty Little Liars, like any number of things. It's like something to how do we stop this monster from killing again when I have a maths test on Friday? It's it's how do we, Buffy, how do I stop the vampires when I have to handle this PTA meeting? It's so classic. It's my favorite. Where am I going to get a dress for the dance at such short notice? If I do this, I might be expelled. I love it so much. And it's something that when I dabble with my own sort of game design stuff, I often think, how do I gamify this? How do I reward this mechanically? And I think Strixhaven does such a good job of being like, okay, yeah, here's the adventure, but also keep in mind you got to study for your, animal biology, your magical beast biology exam because it's gonna happen. And if you don't manage to pass the test, you're going to not be able to attend your extracurriculars. And if you don't attend your extracurriculars, you lose this dice bonus that you could have. I love that, and it does it through rewards rather than penalty. It's just so clever. So I've just been thinking a ton about like how to gamify, how to give mechanisms and mechanics to the other pillars of play because we've got so much that supports combat. And I think that's just the important thing is having sort of a framework, sort of a solid scaffolding to build on when you're trying to role play or explore.
I love that. So the structural things I love that you mentioned, trying to implement mechanics, but in a way that's based on rewards and not just punishments. I think that's a really great thing to call out that I had barely noticed as we've been talking about what Strixhaven brings to the table. Where when you try to add a mechanic to something, you don't want to frustrate people to be like, this thing that used to come naturally is now only a thing that can go wrong. You want it to be a thing that can
Oh
go
yeah.
right. How would you apply that to exploration?
Well, exploration is an interesting one because I did a video on this as well. I recently decided. I don't know whether it's a conclusion I came to. It may not be true, but it's how I feel. I feel like we've gotten to a point where we kind of conflate travel and exploration to be the same thing, right? Where we sort of say, "Oh, exploration, it's having to, go overland to the dungeon," and so, oh, we're frustrated because the ranger is so good at that there's no challenge to it. But I
Mm.
think that the difference is that travel is point A to point B. Exploration, you don't quite know what you're going to find. You don't quite know it's about curiosity. It's about what's over that next hill, what's around that next corner. What if we went one level deeper into the dungeon? So I think so much of that is it comes down to enticing the players. What rewards could they find? So it's something that I think would work particularly well in games where you're focused on, treasure hunting, or if you're, I don't know, mapping an ancient site. Maybe you're archaeologists. I don't know, any number of things. But it's West Marches. West Marches would be a great way to play exploration. It's go out and find what's there, and I think it's that balance of risk reward. That's the joy of exploration. It's we have 8 torches. That'll last us, this much time. But ooh, but I see something shining down there. Down there in that cavern, there's something shining in the water. I wonder what it is. How are we gonna get to it? Are we gonna be able to get to it? Do we have to come back another day? Do we play it safe? Do we do it now? So I think really rewarding your players in that case with like physical goods, right? Like magic items with cool locations that they can maybe turn into a base, reward them with new cool abilities for their character. Stuff like that I think really matches well with an exploration heavy game.
I love that, and that also plays to figuring out what sort of your players most enjoy. Are they looking for lore drops? Are they looking for literal rewards? Or I love the idea of, because it's a thing that has come up in so many games, but I occasionally forget about it. Like the quality of the game that is often choosing a hideout and then developing it for yourselves. It sort of tends to happen a lot, but it's easy for me to forget about that as one of the like secret pillar. Where is home base? And what have we
Yeah.
done to it in terms of traps and or decorations? Uh,
Yeah.
I love that advice. All right, let's see. I'm gonna duck back quickly and go through some of these wonderful questions. Thank you so much to the folks who sent in some questions on Twitter. I want to hit a couple of these general ones that I really loved. Grant Breeze asks, "Where do you think the real sauce and magic is in playing D&D?" I imagine Dale has really interesting thoughts on this, and please feel free to answer either for TTRPGs, D&D in specific, whichever appeals to you.
Thank you, thank you. See, now now I have to say something interesting because that's the expectation. I don't know. I don't think because my brand is vegan evocative, right? Like I'm always sort of going, oh, we want to make this feel like X. But I think the source of D&D, right? I mean, it feels like a boring answer, but it's true. The source of D&D, the thing that makes it magic, is that you're sitting around with a bunch of friends playing make believe. And that's like it's something that is so like deep, very deep in our roots as human beings is telling stories and playing games and imagining stuff. I actually in that introduction to Heroes and Villains of Theros, I talked about the idea that there is a theory. I don't know whether it's true, that humanity and sort of culture began with the first spark of fire because or controlled fire rather, because before that, it gets dark, you go to sleep. But once you are able to light a fire, there's all these people sitting around who they can't go out and forage or hunt, they can't do things, but they are still awake. They have artificial light by which all they can do is tell each other stories. And I think that D&D becomes a new version of sitting around a campfire and telling each other stories. And it ties in with childhood when you're making stuff up and just having fun. And I think that that's something that really appeals to people. It's a really strong way of bonding, a really strong connection with the people around you and the people that you love. And even if you, and I mean, I say friends, right? But it can be friends that you don't know are friends yet. You can sit down with a bunch of strangers in an online game and they can become some of your best friends through this game. And it's a little bit of magic. What's something interesting I can add to that? I think that idea of a jungle gym, I think the fact that the D&D, we're 5 editions deep, right? So this game has in particular had a really long time to develop that scaffolding, that jungle gym that you can climb on, which just makes it feel safe to play, right? It's not just, oh, make up a bunch of stuff together in a group. That feels, I don't know, we're socialized out of that. When we're kids, we can do it, no problem. But when we're adults, it's a little bit harder to just like make stuff up. So you can feel embarrassed about that. You can feel shy. You can feel like whatever you have to say is going to be stupid. But D&D offers you this play set that tells you, you know, come up with an idea. The dice will tell you if it works. It's
Hmm.
not up to you. It's not up to anyone else at the table. There's this impartial element to it that lets you play make believe without feeling silly. And I think that lets it be magic.
I love that. I love that you called that out because that was something that was on my mind very recently, talking on a different stream about the things that you can get out of role playing games, which is this the element of chance not only lets it be full of surprises and twists and turns, but supports folks who might not otherwise be as comfortable being like, this is my big hero moment. Sometimes the dice are like, it's a critical hit. It's a big hero moment. You're just gonna have to live with that. And it's
There's
it's
nothing you
it's
can do. You
beautiful.
are a big hero.
Yeah. You're gonna have to face it. Which reluctant
Yeah.
hero myths can also work very nicely. But yeah, I let that
Very nice.
structure
Joseph Campbell
not
approves.
not as just bounding, but as supporting the creativity. I love that angle on it. As Jungle Jim. Great question from Lance at Quixotic? Sorry, stuff. Is it Quixotic or Quixotic?
Oh, I've always said quixotic, but you're right. Because Quixote,
Okay.
right?
I'm very sorry, Lance.
I've always said quixotic, but you
I
might be
think
right
that's
that it's chaotic.
right.
I don't know.
I think it's okay. They would like to know, where do I start? Which is one of my favorite D&D questions. What would your answer be?
Where do you start? Where do you start? I mean, there's a lot of elements to it. Because do you want to play? Do you want to run? I always recommend that people run. I think that if if there's no one there saying, "Hey, I'm going to run D&D, do you want to play?" then that is your sign that you should go and run D&D. That's my personal opinion. So, I mean, I always say start with the player's handbook, no matter what game it is. pl- start where the players will start. And if you're a player, then that's obviously a really good place to start. Yeah, I mean, it's tricky because it depends on what your situation is. But I said before, follow the white rabbit of fun. So, like, if there is something that's calling to you, if you're saying, "Where do I start?" There's probably something in the back of your head that's like, "I wanna read that. I wanna do that thing. I wanna look at this. I wanna play that adventure. I wanna oh, if I get these people to play a game or if I can," follow that thing, make a character. It's always fun I love learning to make characters in a new system. I love sitting down and just being like, "Okay, let's see what comes up." So figure out what's fun and go with that. If you can't figure out what's fun, maybe start with making a character. I think that's great because if you're DMing, then it means that you'll understand better how characters work. If you're a player, you'll understand how characters work and you'll have a character. I yeah, that's maybe my best advice for that.
I love that. Just jumping into the character. And I have not often given the advice to sort of start out the DMing, but you make a great point. Sometimes you got to be the DM that your group needs. And
Sometimes
ideally,
you
you'll
got to
all
be
be
the
patient with each
GM.
other.
Yeah, it's
Now,
fun.
I
That's how
spent
I got
years as
started.
yeah, I was just gonna ask, I spent years as a player before I finally ventured to the other side of the screen. I felt very intimidated by it, and it turns out it's wonderful. But what was your origin story for D&D?
Well, okay. So I had dabbled. I'd played sort of little bits and pieces of a lot of other tabletop RPGs first. I stumbled my way through. I first found out about tabletop RPGs through Rogue Trader, which is the Warhammer game. I don't know whether it's still being published or not, but my brother played it and he told me stories and I thought this sounds cool. And then, a friend ran a little bit of Paranoia when I was in high school, so I played a couple of sessions of that. Iron Kingdoms, like really some actually quite bizarre tabletop RPGs. And then I actually think it was, I mean, not to get too deep into our past, but it was during a Geek and Sundry Vlogs vlogger hangout, which that's for people who don't know, that's how Amy and I met. Um, where we were talking about a bunch of stuff, and I think it was Sachi who suggested. She said, "Oh, we should all play D&D at some point." And it never came to fruition, but I remember at the time thinking it was such a cool idea. And I like I had already been sort of thinking about sort of RPGs a little bit. And then Sachi said that and I was like, that would be great. And when it didn't happen, I sort of got to the point where I was like, my friends would like that. They should play D&D. I'll figure out how to and I realized they weren't going to do it. So it was going to have to be me. So I went and I got the books and I learned the rules and I I couldn't get them to agree to play. So what I did was I guilted them into it. I said
Okay.
for my birthday, for my birthday, all I want to do is run D&D for you guys. And my friends came over and I ran D&D for them. And technically Pathfinder, but I framed it as D&D. And they came over, and the trick was they're gonna have fun. I know them. I know the kind of stuff they enjoy. They're gonna it was a bunch of people from my acting degree. Of course they were gonna have fun. And so they played it. They had fun, and I got them hooked. I was like, all right, well, if you want to play again, I can run the game. So that's how I ended up with a bunch of nerds for friends who play D&D.
Amazing. Amazing. Let's see. I am having great and more questions coming in.
Bring them on.
Several
Send those
several
questions.
questions related to this, but I will go ahead and hop into Ghastly Moth. Is your character in Matt Colville's game your new favorite, or do you have an evergreen character?
So for people who don't know, I've been playing in a 4th edition Dungeons and Dragons game with Matt Colville and a bunch of the MCDM friends. It's got, Justice Armin, and we've got Anna, and we've got, it's been really fun. It was a weird one where Matt just wanted to say, hey, 4E was good actually. And I want to show
I
people
enjoyed
that.
it.
So let's do a
I'll
live
confess
stream.
that I love 5e, but
Yeah, I mean, I do love 5e as well. I mean, part of why I love 5e so much was something that you said earlier. You mentioned that thing of the positive reinforcement of you can do this and it will benefit you rather than giving people penalties. I like that. But anyway, yeah, so I've been playing in this 4e game that was meant to be maybe 3 sessions long, and now we're 15, 16 sessions deep. I think 15. And it's just become very dramatic. There's a lot going on. Spoiler alert, my character I nearly died and then was teleported into the Shadowfell, basically, and I was hunted, and things were bad, and now my arm is made of ruby and has an AI in it. So, a lot is happening in that game. I would say Levelis is an interesting character because we didn't even really make our characters. We thought this was going to be so short, and none of us understood 4E. So Matt just made us characters. He was like, "Oh, what kind of stuff are you interested? Okay, blah, there you go." And he made us these characters. And so I didn't think I really needed to come up with a background or anything like that. So it's been really an emergent character where I've played and then had to retroactively go on. Okay, so why does she behave like that? All right, maybe it's because of this, and come up with the character that way. So I'm having a really good time with Levelis, but I think I'm always going to have a soft spot for my first D&D character. Far too short-lived, but she was a half-elf rogue named Cricket, and I really liked her. So I think Levelis has won a place in my Hall of Fame for my personal characters, but I think Cricket still has the number one spot.
Too sensitive to ask how Cricket's particular story ended?
It didn't end. It was a fizzle. It was a fizzle
Oh,
campaign. It was
well, that
really
means Cricket's still out
sad.
there.
That's true. That's true, actually. I should bring Cricket back. I'm gonna play out this
Cricket's
character. Dang it.
you gotta do one of those. Just pull them in the between planes for different one shots and be like, I don't know how she got here. That's another
Whoops.
story. Maybe we'll hear it.
It's a story we'll tell someday, maybe.
Oh, I like this from Pretzel. Pretzel. Oh, I read your name the other way first, but that's a great name. Do you try to tie monsters into your world building? What's a monster you'd like to put in a game with cool world building context?
I don't tend to try to try. I don't tend to tie monsters in too closely with my world building, but every now and then it happens, right? I thought that I was not a beholder gal. I was like, beholders, they don't vibe with me. I don't think they jive with my world really. So I probably will just never run a beholder. And then I did this silly thing on Twitter where I asked people to do. I did Monster Madness. It was March at the time, and I said, let's just vote on all the monsters in the Monster Manual, and I'll do a Dael Kingsmill ish version of whatever I end up coming up with, because I don't know, I have my particular flavor. And one of the ones that got voted in was the Beholder. So I was like, all right, let's see if I can make a Beholder that would work in my setting. and I did it, and now I just think it looks so much fun. I've never gotten to run it myself. Other people have run it, but I've never gotten to run it, and it just looks so much fun. It looks scary. It seems like it would be just wild chaos all over the place, and I kind of, I ended up kind of baking it in a little bit into my setting in the process by accident, and now I do have elements of my game world where I'm like, "Okay, well, I want to play a beholder, so let me figure out where it fits and make a whole thing around it." Which, by the way, it's under the Dwarven City. None of my players know that, but if they go there, they'll find out.
Good luck to your players. It's always a
Yeah.
dangerous thing when your DM is falling in love with different monsters.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see. We have some. Oh, I love this from Varrock, 72. Do you prefer to play characters who are closer to your natural state, or I'm guessing real personality, or really work to play an opposing character type? And also, what school are you in
Mm.
Strixhaven from Bear Wonder while we're at this?
I think I'm, what was it? I
Prismari?
wanna say Prismati. Prismari, thank you. I think I'm Prismari, which, I mean, really, I feel like checks out. I was a theater kid. I run a I run a blue-red deck. Yeah, it seems to make sense. I I think in some ways my characters all end up being a bit like me, even if I don't intend for them to be. Um, I hope not too like me, because some of them are not great people. But I feel like there's a little bit of me in each of them, you know? And I don't think it's deliberate. It's just that I look back at some point and I go, wait a minute, I can relate to that. Which I think is just a little part of I don't think it's very easy to play a character long term that doesn't start to morph into you a little bit, just
Mm,
because, maintaining that character in totally unforeseen, like if you're following a script, right? You can play a character that doesn't have to be anything like yourself because you know where the story's going. You can fully see the arc of this character and who they are and what's happening in their mind. But if you're playing this game and you don't know what's coming up and you're reacting naturally in the moment, I think you start to bleed together a little bit.
mm. And I do think there's
Maybe not
also
other
a
people.
sense. What?
Maybe not other people. Maybe that's just me.
I think you are very right, especially in terms of like that the character may not exactly be you, but it'll usually draw on some element of your personality, and that might be tied to sort of you'll tend to over time have the most fun with characters where like the thing the character tends to do sits nicely in the stuff you enjoy overlap, whether or not you are doing the same things for the same reasons. I think it's probably part of the reason that no matter what character I play, eventually they're gonna have a little bit of curiosity, even if I'm not fully leaning into like I've made yet another academic in D&D. But like they're going to
Yeah.
have a little bit of curiosity because I can't get that far into a campaign without wanting to ask questions. And because that's
Right.
what's so fun
Yeah.
for me. But I might have to figure out why this
Yeah.
person would have that kind of curiosity. I may have to try to make it a mercenary curiosity, or find a
Yeah.
different flavor to put on there. But I know myself too well and what I enjoy in games that like I could never spend years with someone who just didn't care. You know what I mean? In addition to that
Yeah.
not being
It's
particularly fun to
it's
play with.
I wanna do this thing, so how do I make that make sense? Which I've done a bit with Levelis in particular. It's like, I gotta figure out a way to make her be interested in this. How can this possibly make sense? But no, I think yeah, similarly, it's like I can make a rogue character who's like, "Oh, I don't care about people," but ultimately, they're not a rogue character who doesn't care about people. They're just a bit mischievous. Like, it's just gonna happen that way. Just by virtue of being me, I think.
Let's see. We had so many wonderful. I don't know if there's a quick answer to this, but one more on the mythology topic that came in from Red Nightmare. If there is an answer to this, what kind of god is missing from most standard D&D pantheons?
Aha. See, this is an interesting question because, uh, I think I can say, oh, if you're missing one of those purpose, authority, treachery, harbor characters, then there probably is something missing from the mythology. But I don't know whether there's like a specific domain or sort of deific position that can be classed as missing, right? Because
Mm,
it all comes down to culture from my perspective at the very least. Because I'm coming at this from a mythological perspective rather than a fantasy perspective. It's like, if a culture doesn't have a concept of property or ownership, then they're not going to have a god of thieves. It's just not going to
mm.
happen, even though that's a fairly common thing. Um, but is there one that tends to be missing? I don't think. Okay, here's what I'll say. I don't think that it's necessarily that something is missing, but I do think that there is often a misinterpretation that makes gods elemental rather than cultural. So, we'll see Poseidon as a god of water, and we'll see, someone like Demeter as a god of nature, of plants, right? But that's not it. She's the god of the harvest. Poseidon is the god of ocean voyages, things like this. And so it's these elements that if you're going to look at like a nature god, don't make them be about plants so much as the concept of wilderness, because that's what comes up a lot in particularly classical mythology, is this conflict between civilization and the wilds, right? Like, you look at Thebes, you go on the road outside Thebes and you get attacked by the Sphinx because you're not in civilization anymore. Suddenly it's dangerous because you're not inside the safety of the city gates. So that's this constant thing. There's wilderness and there's civilization, and they are constantly vying for control of the places in between where there are roads and forests, right? So if you're making a god of nature, often it's not actually about animals and plants, it's about the concept of untamed places. So yeah, I think that's what I would say, is it's not missing but maybe misunderstood.
Oh, I love that. Let's see. Big question, but Zindale15 asks, "What's your favorite story you've taken away from any session?"
Okay, wait, I've got one. This is tricky because I've told it somewhere before, but maybe only on my channel, so maybe people don't know it. This was a couple years ago, back in the before times when flying and conventions were real. I was on a panel at San Diego Comic Con that was D&D for beginners, and we just finished, we just wrapped up, and we had these games of D&D organized. It was like, hey, if anyone wants to try and get started, come down to the game rooms and we're going to have like 5 games running at the same time, right? So I sat in on one of those games, and a woman came and sat next to me. I think she was in her 80s, and she sort of tapped me on the shoulder, and she looked me dead in the eye and she said, am I too old to start playing D&D? Do you think I'm too old to begin playing D&D? And I told her, Dame Judy Dench plays D&D with her grandchildren, right? That's what I said. And she said, okay. And she sat down next to me, and she picked up on things fairly quickly. She had a couple of questions, what really is a rogue? What is a drow? Because we had these pre-made characters, and she got a drow rogue. What's a drow? And I explained it, and I explained, proficiency bonuses and how the numbers came together, and she picked it up fairly quickly, so quickly that as we're running this game, we're going through these tunnels that have opened up under the town, and we're exploring, and she's like, oh well, I've got the highest stealth, I'll creep ahead and I'll scout out what's going on ahead. And she scouted it out, and she found out that it was super dangerous. There was like a nest of bullets, and she was like, oh okay, that's good information. And then she came back to the rest of the party, and she lied to our faces and told us that there was nothing wrong. She knew, she knew how dangerous it was. And she went, no, it's fine. Because she was like, well, you told me that I was sneaky. I was like, what? It was the greatest thing I've. She might be a natural. She was so good. I miss her every day.
I hope she's still playing. And,
I hope
may
she's still playing.
the gods have mercy on her party.
Oh yeah. So good. Oh, I love it. Oh, brilliant.
Oh, that's wonderful. Oh, I love this. Montroyal says, "Great interview. Been watching Dale's videos for a while. I always email them to my grandma."
Oh, that's nice. That's what I say at the end of my videos. I say email this to your grandma. That's nice. That makes me happy. Your grandma should play D&D.
Yeah, heck yeah. Let's
Yeah.
see. Unsalted Bork is asking you to play favorites. Fawn or Satyr? Leonin or Tabaxi?
Okay. This is an odd answer because I wanna say fawn out of fawn and satyr. I grew up on Narnia, right? I can never say no to fawns. Um, even though, I mean, obviously fawns and satyrs, right? But I think Leonin for I think I go Leonin over Tabaxi. I just like them. I think they're neat. They've got the mane. I like them.
It's a
Sorry,
good answer and a
Tabaxi.
good reason.
Yeah.
Uh,
I just think they're neat.
let's see. Oh, goodness, this hour has flown by. Thank you so much for hanging out and talking D&D with me. Where can people find more of the wit and wisdom and wonder of Dale Kingsmill?
Well, you can find me on YouTube at Monarch's Factory, where I make lots of videos about many different things, but amongst them D&D and mythology fairly frequently. You can find me on Twitter at Daily Dale, and I'm on a podcast at the moment called Eldritch Lawcast, which is it's intended to talk about sort of news in the world of tabletop RPGs and D&D, but frequently devolves into just talking about game design and the sort of intricacies of that. And it's got, James Hake and Sean Merwin and Ben Byrne. And it's a lot of fun.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're watching this, I hope you will go track down all of Dale's stuff because it's incredible. And also, I should mention we have a lot more good stuff coming up this week at D&D Beyond. Stay tuned. We have a wonderful guest coming in on Thursday that I'm just going to tease. Y'all are going to enjoy the return of a loved guest and lots of cool stuff going on at the site. You might have noticed if you are a subscriber, you have some extremely goofy and wonderful fuzzy dice waiting for you as your subscriber perk. Stay tuned. Dev update. We have a lot to talk about. Lots of good stuff going on. I appreciate all of you being here. Dale, I appreciate you so much for coming by the stream.
Thank you for inviting me. This was nice.
This was so much fun, and we will see you next time on D&D Beyond.
It's D&D.